What do you do when your daughter asks you,
Dad, how do you grow plants from sticks?
well, you make a video about plant propagation and you have her help you in the process so that she can learn. In this video, we're going to go over the tools needed for plant propagation, how to collect cuttings, how to care for your cuttings so that we'll have roots in about 8 to 12 weeks. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren and you're watching The Plant Doctor. Let's get started. Before we take cuttings, let's talk about the tools that you're going to need for the job. So you're going to need some hand snips. You're going to need some rooting hormone. You're going to need some peat. So this is, technically this is like 90% peat, 10% perlite in this mixture already. But the more peat, the better. And then you're going to need some perlite. And you need something to grow your plants in while they're rooting, and it really doesn't matter what you use. I'm trying to use a do-it-yourself perspective here as cheap as possible, give you a bunch of different options. If you've got leftover 4-inch cups, you can use that. Leftover 6-packs, you can use that as well, or leftover 4-packs. Just anything. I'm all the time looking to reuse these plastics from the garden because they tend to stack up, and I'm not a fan of single-use plastic, so I'm trying to reuse these. So if you got some of these laying around, they're absolutely perfect for doing this. Now, once you have all that figured out, you need something to grow your cuttings in. And you can use either a humidity dome, like I have here. I picked this up from my local hardware store. Or if you don't want to spend the money on that, I think those run like $8 or $10. Heck, with inflation, they might be 12 now. I'm not really sure. But if you have a clear Rubbermaid with a clear lid laying around the house, you can use this as well. We just need something, once we have our plants in our cups or our flats, whatever we're growing in, we need something to put them in to keep the humidity level as high as possible. Now that we have our tools for the job, we can go outside and collect our cuttings. I want to give you a pro tip here with collecting cuttings. As you're walking around the yard, it's imperative to keep your cuttings as moist as possible. If you have a 5-gallon bucket laying around, fill it with some cool water, and as you're walking around the yard taking your cuttings, put the cuttings in the water, and that's going to help preserve the cuttings and ultimately increase our rooting success rate. So the first plant that I want to go over about taking cuttings and propagating is Sedum. And this particular cultivar is Autumn Joy. So during the fall, September, October time period, this is just covered in flowers. It's a pollinator attractor. You'll have tons of bees, tons of butterflies visit your garden if you have lots of sedums in it. And this is also one of the easiest plants to propagate. Sedums can be grown almost anywhere. This is USDA zones 2 through 10. So very northern climates all the way down into the deep south, down into Florida, we can grow sedums. They're extremely drought tolerant, and once the roots have established themselves down into your native soil, you'll rarely, if ever, have to water sedums. This is by far the easiest plant to propagate. The reason is it has a very thick cuticle. So a cuticle is just a waxy covering over a leaf. All leaves have a cuticle, but the thickness of the cuticle varies from species to species. The fact that this has a thick cuticle we can take advantage of. It's going to hold water in its leaves for a very long time. All plant propagation is a race against time. There's water in the cutting that we're going to take, and we're trying to grow roots off of that cutting before the water in the leaves evaporate. That's the name of the game with propagation. So any plant with a really thick cuticle, it's going to hold its water for a very long time, and we can take advantage of this. Now, in terms of taking your cutting, you'll want to count down 4 to 6 nodes. So a node is a site of vegetative development, so you're just going to count down 4 to 6 leaves. Below that 6th leaf, you can make your cut and then hand remove those bottom 2 to 4 leaves so that you're just left with a cluster of leaves on the top, and that is the cutting that we're going to propagate. A plant that I have propagated dozens and dozens of times is this purple flower here in front of me. This is Salvia May Night. This is a perennial, USDA zones 4 through 9. full sun situations, you can see where the name May Night comes from. This begins to bloom in the month of May here for me in zone 8A, and is going to continue to bloom profusely through about the first part of July. And then it's going to fade off, but you can prune this back and make it bloom again. I did a video about that. I'll try to leave it up here somewhere, a link for it. But to take a cutting off of Salvia, to grow it from a cutting, it's a little bit different than Sedum in the fact that these already have flowers. We're still going to count down 6, maybe 8 nodes on a branch. We're going to cut it off, but we need to remove the flowers or the flower buds that are on the cutting that we just took from the plant. The reason being is we want the energy that is left in our cutting not to go to flower development, but to generate some new roots for us. So make sure you remove the flowers off of your cuttings for May Night. The next perennial that we can easily grow from a cutting is North America's favorite perennial. This is milkweed. So milkweed is very important in the fact that the monarch butterflies need this in order to complete their life cycle. And any landscape that I've ever done, I've always tried to include some milkweed in it to benefit the monarchs. But we can use the milkweed just like with Salvia. We're going to go down 6 nodes or so, make our cut. Hopefully we have a branch with no flower. If you do have a flower on it, you'll want to remove that flower to have a proper cutting for milkweed. One thing that I like to do with plants, if you look at a color wheel, there's something called complementary colors, where oranges and blues are directly across from each other. And that's a nice combination of colors anytime you can get what we call complementary colors, colors that are directly across from each other on a color wheel matched up together. So the Salvia May Night, along with this orangish colored milkweed, has a nice color contrast and brings some interest to the garden as well. Another one of my full sun favorites in terms of perennials is Rudbeckia, or Black-Eyed Susan. This particular cultivar is Goldstrom, USDA zones 3 through 9. I'm kind of on the more southern end of the range for Goldstrom here, but I'm in full sun. As you can see here, this area just gets beat with sun, and they look fantastic. They're fully budded up, ready to go here in early June. But how do we take a cutting off of Rudbeckias? The same way with the previous plants. I want you to go down 4 to 6 nodes, make a cut. Now this time of year, one thing you need to look for, even though they're not in bloom yet, if you look down at the top of your cutting, you may see a little ball. That is the bud for the flower. You'll need to go ahead and remove that. Here again, remember, we're trying to get all the energy left in our cutting to go towards root development and not anything else. We're not trying to grow extra leaves, especially not flowers. That takes a lot of energy away from your cutting. So if you see a little flower bud at the top, make sure to remove it. If you can see me through these beautiful flower stalks here, this is lavender, and it is in full bloom for me here in early June. But this is another very easy plant to propagate. USDA zones 4 through 9 on lavender. I'm kind of on the more southern end for lavender here where I'm at. And in the middle of the summer, it may get a little crunchy on me if I don't give it some occasional water just from the heat that it gets here. It is in full sun. But what you want to do, lavender its leaves are a little bit different. I don't want you necessarily counting nodes here. Because of the leaf structure of the plant, you're not going to have enough stalk material to actually grow some decent roots. But just take a cutting that's roughly 3, maybe 5 inches long, and then if you've got a flower stalk on top of your cutting, you'll want to remove that. So when I say 3 to 5 inches long, I'm measuring from the top leaf on my cutting down. Don't measure from the top of the flower stalk down, because what you're going to end up with is something that looks like this, and that's not what we want. We want vegetative material, we want leaves, not flowers. So count down 3 to 5 inches from the top leaf, make your cutting, and then remove the flower stalk. So I'm not sure whether we should label this a perennial or a deciduous shrub, because it does go dormant all the way down to the ground and then come back. Leave your thoughts down in the comments for me below on how you would classify this. But this is butterfly bush. Butterfly bush is USDA zones 3 through 9. There's some cultivar dependence with that in terms of the range. Some of them are a little more cold hardy, some of them are a little more heat tolerant. This one's in full sun here, but in order to propagate this, Go down, so the branches tend to Y off. So you'll have a branch and then there'll be a branch come off of that one and a branch come off of that one. Go all the way down to the base of a branch where it connects to the base branch. Remove that. Here again, you're probably going to end up with 6 or 8 nodes. Remove the bottom leaves, and if you get a cutting that has flowers, so here in early June, you can see we do have some flower development here, and some of these flowers are completely spent already. This was one of my early bloomers. It starts blooming in April for me. Remove those. All we want is leaf material here. So anytime we have a flower, make sure you're removing those. But this is a very easy plant to propagate. If you're just now getting into plant propagation and you're wanting to cut your teeth on a plant that's easy to propagate, number one so far would be Sedum, but this would be right behind it, butterfly bush. The next plant that is easy to propagate is technically not a perennial. I would label this as a deciduous shrub. But this is Limelight Hydrangea, super easy to propagate. What I want you to do is count down 5 or 6 nodes, make a cut at that 5th or 6th node. That is your cutting. Remove the bottom leaves so that you have 2 to 4 leaves remaining on top. A pro tip for you, if you have leaves that are really large that are remaining on your cutting, one thing you can do is fold them in half and then cut them in half with a pair of hand snips. This is going to reduce water loss through the leaf. So remember, the whole premise of this is trying to grow roots before the leaf loses all of its water. So the lower the surface area we have for the leaf, the least amount of water it's going to lose through its leaves itself. Another cold hardy plant that we can easily propagate from cuttings is this Russian sage, also referred to sometimes from its genus Propagate. This is hardy all the way to USDA Zone 2. So zones 9 through 2, you can grow Russian sage, extremely cold hardy. But the propagation process for taking a cutting is very similar to the other ones we've looked at. You'll want to count down 5 to 6 nodes, make your cut, and then if you have flowers here, like you see here, blooming profusely in the month of June, you'll want to remove those as well. So cut the flowers off so that you're left with 5 to 6 nodes and you'll have a good cutting that should easily root. Now, I want you to notice here again, I like to plant Propagate, this purple flower, with something yellow. So these are Stella deora daylilies. So I'm hoping you learn more than just plant propagation here. I'm showing you some complementary plants, some complementary colors that you could implement in your landscape as well. Let's walk into the studio. I'm going to show you the planting media that we're going to be using and how to care for our cuttings. Now that we have our cuttings, we need to prepare our media for growing our cuttings. What I like to use is 2 parts peat to 1 part perlite. So we take 2 scoops of peat, 1 part perlite, mix it homogeneously till we have an even blend, and that is going to be what we use to grow our cuttings in. A pro tip for you. Peat and perlite are very dry when you take them out of the bag. Go ahead and pre-moisten your mixture before putting your cuttings into the media. In particular with peat. Peat is hydrophobic until it's hydrophilic, and that's a fancy way of saying it doesn't absorb a whole lot of water at first. It actually repels the water, but as water gets in around it, it will hold a bunch of water. So what you want to do is just very lightly water that mixture in until it's holding a good amount of water, and now it's prepared for growing some cuttings. The process for sticking our cuttings into the media is going to be the same regardless of species of plant that we have collected today. Use a pencil to create a small hole in the media that you're using. From there, take your cutting, dip it in rooting hormone, place the cutting in the hole that you created with the pencil, and then lightly press the soil in around it. The reason you do not want to take your cutting and stick it directly into the media without using the pencil is there's 2 things that could happen here. You could either break your cutting as you're trying to press it in, but more importantly, you're going to rub the rooting hormone off of your cutting, therefore lowering the chance that we're going to have roots here in 6 to 8 weeks. Now that we have our flat of cuttings, let's talk about care for our cuttings. It's going to take roughly 6 to 8, possibly up to 12 weeks to get these to root. There's a bunch of different variables at play here, the time of year that you're doing this and the amount of sunlight it gets, the temperature, but most of these should root. And we're going to take our flat of cuttings. I'm going to place it in this Rubbermaid here. It fits perfectly. We're going to put the lid on the Rubbermaid and seal it. The key here is humidity control. We want 100% humidity in here at all times. So you'll want to check this every so often. Where I want you to put this is a place that's going to get some indirect sunlight. So a south-facing window in your house. If you have an outdoor porch, that's the perfect spot for it, especially in summertime. It's going to get some heat generated in this Rubbermaid, but not so much heat that it's going to kill your cuttings. Where I don't want you to put it is full sun. In any circumstance, it's going to get way too hot in here. It'll get 150, 160 plus degrees, and we're going to cook our cuttings. So indirect sunlight for 6 to 8 weeks, possibly longer. And a pro tip for you here, about once a week, what I want you to do is just crack the lid a little bit. Let some fresh air in there. So remember, plants, they're producing oxygen, right? They take in CO2 and they're releasing oxygen. And this is pretty much an airtight container. So once a week, open it up, let some of that oxygen out, let some fresh CO2 get in, and then put the lid back on and wait for our roots to develop. There's some things that we need to look for in order to ensure our cuttings are going to make it long term once we have our lid on. What I want to do is turn the camera around, give you a point of view perspective of some things that I want you to look for in order to ensure that your cuttings are going to make it. So after your lid has been on for a couple of hours, there's something I want you to look for. Condensation. And I'm hoping it shows up on camera. It seems like this would be something difficult to see on camera, especially with the kind of the murky finish of the top of this Rubbermaid, but I think you can, there's a leaf touch in the top right here. I think you can see there's some wet right here, all right? You want condensation all the time on your lid. If you're not seeing condensation, you don't have enough water in here. Remember, we're looking for 100% humidity. Look for condensation. Also, after your cuttings have been in for a week or so, we've already mentioned about giving them some air, but I want you to just take a look at them. There's a few things that we need to be aware of when doing cuttings this way. And one of those things is going to be looking for mold or fungus that are growing in here. So it's 100% humidity. There's hardly zero airflow moving in and around here. So look underneath, especially things like hydrangeas. Look on the bottom of leaves, look for little white specks, look for black specks. And if you see that, one thing you can use to eliminate that is copper sulfate. So copper sulfate is labeled organic. So if you want to do this organically, you can use that option. Another option is Daconil. So just lightly spray over the top with Daconil or copper sulfate if you're seeing those issues. If you do find yourself needing to add water to your cuttings, don't take like a jug and just dump a bunch of water on here. Take a spray bottle and lightly mist over the top and then put your lid back on. If you water too heavily, you're just going to wash all the rooting hormone off, and you're going to have some of your cuttings just fall over because of the energy of the water just being too much and pushing them over. So just lightly spray them. If you have any tips, tricks, or hacks that you use for your plant propagation that we did not go over, please leave those down in the comments below. Here on the channel, we're a community of learners, and I would love to learn something from you, the viewer. Guys, as always, thank you for watching A Plant Doctor. And until next time, happy gardening.